In a woodworking shop, you can never have enough clamps, but sometimes, no matter how many clamps you don't have the right kind of clamp. So I made some specialty clamps. These are long reach C-clamps that can reach places that most clamps can't reach. And in this video I'll go through and show you how I made those. So here's a corner on my prototype clamp. So I've got these fingers extending into the other piece. But what I did is I have 2 fingers coming in from the horizontal piece and 3 from this piece. And to make it stronger, this time I'm going to have 3 pieces coming in here. And then this piece is going to be wider this way so that I have another finger on either side to make this whole elbow a little bit stronger. Now to center my series of cuts so that I have my fingers relatively centered, I marked a center on one of my pieces of wood, which I'm going to put in a screw advanced box joint jig. Now that I've got this adjusted to exactly have the blade in the center, I need to make it so that my cuts are centered around here. Now to do a 3/8 inch cut, I'm making a cut at this position and at this position. So that means halfway in between needs to be where my mark is. So let's decouple this, and I'm going to turn this gear to be about halfway in between, so that when I make a cut here and here, that slot is centered where I have my mark. Now for these pieces here, I don't actually have a cut where the middle is, so I need to offset the whole thing by 1 turn, so that my notches are offset by 3/8 of an inch, because each turn on here is 3/8 of an inch, so that basically the middle piece that's left is going to be exactly centered. Now before I'm going to glue this together, I need to put the thing in here for putting the screw in. On my prototype clamp, I just threaded the threaded rod straight through the wood. That is, I drilled a hole and then I just tapped it through with a metal tap. And that thread holds in the cross grain of the wood well enough. The only problem is this doesn't turn super easily, so I can't really spin this clamp very well. So what I'm going to do with these clamps is I'm going to embed a nut straight in the wood. So that's a little bit awkward. Ideally, I would be using a T-nut like this, because those are much easier to mount. But this is a 1/2 inch thread, or be close to like an M12 thread. So I can't get a T-nut that size, so I'm going to have to actually embed a nut in the wood. So I was about to start drilling a big hole and then chiseling that hexagonal to fit the nut when I realized, hey, wait a minute, I have a machine that I can use to cut a hexagonal hole. My pantarotor, of course. So I made a hexagonal template, and that made for perfect holes exactly the shape of my nuts. So I cut a hexagonal cavity on either side, which I can then fit a nut into. And then with a nut on both sides, I can put the threaded rod in there, and that holds the nuts in place, and the threaded rod is running all along metal. Now just a few more machining operations on my parts before I can glue it all together. I use a thin strip of wood to get glue into all the surfaces of the internal joint, so that when I put it together I'll be sure that I have glue everywhere. Cleaning up some of the excess glue squeeze out with sawdust. So the next tricky part is how this pad is held on here. This pad is there so that the end of the screw doesn't damage the wood, and it's held in place with a pin. So if we pull that out, I have this thing made cylindrical at the end and a notch cut into it. And in here I have a small metal washer so that it doesn't wear through the wood as quickly. Now I don't have a metal lathe to make this, but I have a trick. Now to make some pads to go on the end of my threaded rods. And rounding off the corners of the clamps. So next, to make some handles for the clamps, I'm using a 1/2 inch roundover bit to round the corners of the clamp handles. And then I use that same bit to round over the ends of the handles. So after I drilled the hole in the threaded rod, I also drilled a hole in the handle. And then I drove this nail through both of those holes, getting them all lined up, and cut it off on the other end, and that secures the handle in place. So here's my clamps all done. I painted them blue so that when I take pictures with the clamps on them, they don't look like one of the pieces of stocks that I'm working on. Came out kind of ugly, but the red handles are nice. Well, I took the scale up to 260 pounds. That's as far as this one will go. And my clamp is holding up just fine, so I'm pretty sure these are good for at least 300 pounds, and that's the long one. The short ones should be even better. So these clamps have all kinds of uses, like digging something up on the table saw, for example, or clamping down a resaw fence in a bandsaw, or holding big awkward panels on my panther rotor or on my slot mortising machine. Now here's where the new clamps are really useful. Suppose I'm gluing this onto this other panel here. So I can always just put little clamps on here to make sure the two boards line up, but in the middle I just can't reach it with any other clamp. And so with one of my long reach clamps, I can just get in there and squeeze those together to get them to line up flush.